Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of theCUBE's live coverage of the Snowflake Summit 2025 here at San Francisco's Moscone Center. I'm your host, Rebecca Knight, alongside my co-host and analyst, Dave Vellante. We've got 2 terrific guests for this next segment. I would like to welcome Brad Jones, CISO and VP of Information Security at Snowflake. Welcome, Brad.
Well, thank you.
And Adam DeMonaco, Chief Information Security Officer at Rakuten. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So for our viewers who are maybe a little not in the know, can you describe your company a little bit? And then we want to talk about how you work together with Snowflake.
Sure. Rakuten Rewards is an online shopping platform that provides rewards and cash back for common shopping experiences.
Okay, and so how has Snowflake helped you move away from patchwork security to create a more consistent, unified approach to how you approach security?
Our big focus has really been on centralizing our data and then making the best use of our data from an analytical perspective. So we've been able to move from a distributed model to more of a centralized model, and then being able to centralize security controls based on the classification through discovery, and been able to really centralize that platform quite a bit.
Okay.
And are you using AI to do that classification, or?
We're using a bunch of different tools, but AI is a bit of that, and some LLMs to be able to discover and then classify, and then ensure that we have the proper security controls based on the compliance requirements and best practices.
So guys, you are CISOs, CSOs, your job is to protect us. Everybody's crazy about AI, everybody loves AI. Every CISO I talk to is like, oh boy. Like I think about MCP. Oh, everybody's like really excited about it. CISOs are like, hang on. So, give us the reality check. How should we be thinking about pursuing the opportunity around AI while at the same time balancing the need to protect everybody?
Well, I think any company that doesn't embrace AI is going to be left behind.
Right.
So there's no path where you don't engage in AI or don't leverage it for your business. The most important thing is you have to establish guardrails and guidelines. Governance structures around what is appropriate use of AI, what's not appropriate use of AI, what data sets are appropriate to use it with, which business decisions are appropriate to use it with. Things maybe like customer service are a perfect example where it's probably a good opportunity. HR hiring decisions, financial decisions, probably not there right now, but you have to establish those guardrails, and it's all risk-based, so the company needs to get alignment on that governance.
It's kind of broad questions, if I may, on security. I mean, 2 years ago at RSA, we put out a survey with ETR, and we're basically trying to understand the tool sprawl and how CISOs are thinking about that and handling it. There was no evidence that customers were able to reduce the number of vendors in their tool stack. We're starting to see at least some stability going on there. At the same time, when we talk to CISOs, they underscore the need to try new stuff that fills gaps that their existing tools don't. So, as CISOs and your peers, what are you seeing with regard to that complexity? And then I really want to get into how Snowflake and you guys deal with that. But broadly speaking, what's the gestalt look like?
Yeah, so really what I do is align with the business partners to be able to understand what the strategy is, and then understand where there's risk associated and where there may be tooling to get visibility into that risk, and then what we can do from a security control to provide some reduction of that risk and governance around that risk as well. So it doesn't really change just because of AI. I think the fidelity has changed quite a bit in terms of the attacks that can be used, developed using AI and LLMs. So the complexity gets ratcheted up. But from a business strategy perspective, we're just paired very closely with the business to be able to understand where there's gaps and to be able to empower them to do the work, while we can, in the back end, provide as much context and visibility into the risk so that we can properly communicate that back to the business to be able to understand whether they want to proceed and whether we can actually be able to get more visibility into that risk and be able to reduce that risk over time as well.
So as a FinTech company, where are the biggest gaps, and what are your pain points and challenges?
The biggest one is the data sprawl, right? Being able to share data with multiple different third parties or second parties in Rakuten's instance, because we were an international organization. Being able to identify the data, being able to secure the data in transit and at rest, and then also to be able to discover that data that's coming in, be able to classify that data and be able to provide the proper controls. Those are the real big challenges, while also keeping up with the compliance requirements, being a global company as well.
In a highly regulated industry.
Exactly, exactly.
Brad,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the CISOs I talk to say, look, a big part of this is cultural. We have to educate people. Lena Smart, who's the CISO of Mongo, I don't know if you know Lena, says just don't click on links. Okay, but it's hard. So I feel like when you're inside a Snowflake, you're protected. How important, I mean, I'm sure it's still important, but do you know, good security is always overwhelmed by bad user behavior. So can you protect, with your governance and security strategy, can you protect the user from themselves?
Yeah, we think we're best positioned to do that by having a uniform governance and control structure around all of the data, from ingestion through business insights. The challenges when you have third-party tool sprawl is you're trying to take that same governance and control structure and map it to disparate platforms. By having a uniform control structure, governance structure that goes multi-cloud, multi-CSP with Snowflake, you get that uniformity, and then you can allow users to innovate with AI because it's working within your security boundary.
So, if I may, a couple years ago we came up with this concept called supercloud, and we used Snowflake as the sort of poster child for that concept. The idea was that you would, it was meant to be more than multi-cloud. It was kind of what multi-cloud should have been, where you've got a capability that spans multiple clouds, abstracts the underlying primitives, and simplifies the world. So we used Snowflake as an example. You mentioned multi-cloud. That does bring up complexities. And we said one of the risks to multi-cloud or super cloud execution was security. So how are you dealing with that sort of common framework across multiple clouds? Clearly that's something that Snowflake does, and do you guys also participate across cloud?
Yeah, so I mean, we take that out of the hands of the users, or the responsibility of the users. One of our main tenets is that it's easy to use. We make all that hard stuff underneath transparent to you, so you don't have to deal with the nuances of a AWS, a GCP, or an Azure. It just works the same. Your control policies work uniformly across all of those underlying CSPs.
And Rakuten Rewards, you like choose one cloud, I don't care, you're just going through Snowflake, how does that work? Some customers tell me, I don't ever see the cloud primitives, I just see Snowflake, which makes me happy, they say.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fringe cases of which we're trying to communicate, educate, and build awareness around the use of our platform in Snowflake, and then the controls that we have around it to be able to protect that data from being shared by second and third parties as well. And that's where it really becomes that communication, education, and building awareness to be able to ensure that there's an understanding of the service that we provide from a Snowflake perspective and how they can adopt that as well. And then there's really just governance around and policy around the different types of cloud solutions and how we want to standardize, because we have our controls. So that allows us to not have to create multiple different controls from multiple different solutions. Right, and it's just really around the standardization across the organization.
We've all experienced the Department of No, whether it's IT, security. And my understanding is that once you get through the MSA and the security checks with customers, that new services that come in, because they're inside of the Snowflake stack, get approved very quickly. Is that technically correct? And is that, from a business standpoint, how you guys are operating?
It is technically correct, and that we put a lot of effort into that. We have our compliance folks that are embedded with our engineering and product teams. As we're developing products and services, we make sure we not only adhere to the standards that we've already signed up for that are part of those MSAs, but are future looking as we anticipate new regulations or sovereign requirements, or like DORA or EU AI Act, that have a long line of sight into that, and we're building that into our development process.
Is that standard practice across a lot of organizations, in the sense of making sure the compliance folks are working hand in glove with
I would hope so. I can't speak for every organization, but it's part of our our core understanding that we're always, anything that we release is going to meet the standards of anything we've already agreed to, and we have that foresight of what we're going to be running into as we get into new regions and specific requirements or emerging standards that come out.
How prevalent are you seeing shadow AI, and how are you dealing with it? Are there emerging use cases that are challenging, for instance, mobile? Well, you're not supposed to use whatever, this tool, but then somebody goes to their mobile and they're putting confidential information for a product launch that they shouldn't be putting in there because they're trying to write better marketing. I mean, how are you dealing, what are you seeing with shadow AI and the security threats, and how are you dealing with it?
Well, so I think there's a big difference in the plethora of services that are out there, right? There's some that we outright don't trust, things like DeepSeek, the service, there's a lot of things that have come out that we shouldn't really trust what they're doing there. There are other services we have better confidence that they're doing what they say they do. As part of getting our ISO 42001 certification, where we have an AI governance structure, part of that was educating our employees of what is right and wrong to do with AI. It's okay to query ChatGPT to understand a term, but not okay to be uploading internal documents to it. We've put a lot of effort around providing internal tooling on the Snowflake platform to say, hey, you can do all of this stuff internally. When someone tries to go to ChatGPT at Snowflake, they get a splash page. It alerts them, here's the AI policy that you should understand. Here's a list of all of our internal tools. If these don't meet your needs, please proceed, and there's a button to proceed, but we'd like feedback on what we're not doing, how we're not serving you internally.
I was surprised, so you're very selective about which models you'll allow inside of Snowflake. No. I was kind of surprised when I saw how many people sort of embraced the DeepSeek and made it widely available, whether it's in model gardens, the hyperscalers. It was almost like a race to say, yeah, we can do this too. Now, I don't know what kind of controls maybe they put in place, but as I say, you guys are very selective. You want to have choice, but that choice is got to be secure and governed and fit. Yeah,
I think there's a big difference between the models and the services. So anytime we bring in a model, we do red teaming on that model, threat modeling on it, and we have certain protections in place that users can implement, like our Cortex card that gives them kind of an LLM gateway where they can put certain controls, get visibility of what people are doing in that model. But we take a lot of effort to make sure that anything that we bring into our platform, there's a lot of vetting of it.
So the stress testing that you're doing and making sure that employees are keeping your company safe, and how, I'm curious about the culture around AI within your employees. These are technology companies, so obviously these are people who like to experiment and who like to explore, but yet there is also this stigma with AI that it is coming for people's jobs. How, as CISOs and people who are in this space, how do you think about it, and how do you bring people along to make sure that in fact they are experimenting in the right way, but also are excited about it and feel empowered by it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, as I said before, you have to lean into it. Anyone who's worried that it's going to be taking their job really needs to be refactoring that to think of how it's going to help me do my job in a more efficient way. Think of it, as co-pilots that are helping you do more of those menial tasks, getting insights quicker. We look at it as, SOC analysts, like we can quickly bring someone who has the right ideas, but may not have the technical chops to have how to ask the questions of the data. It's democratizing that such they can get to those and quickly get to the results they need.
So Adam, how is Rakuten Rewards leveraging what's inside of Snowflake? I wonder if you could paint a picture. There's Horizon, governance,
sure.
There's obviously the data cloud itself. What are the salient aspects of the Snowflake stack that are helping you meet your mission?
Sure, so I think that you touched on the Horizon Center. The other one is the Trust Center as well. There's a rapid adoption of Snowflake across our organization, not just with rewards, but international, as well as Rakuten Group, which is a global organization, right? So the quick adoption has moved faster than our governance principles. So it's really around using the tooling within Snowflake and partnering with Snowflake to really understand where there's gaps and being able to fill those gaps as quickly as possible, while also integrating to the security controls that we currently have in place, whether it's from an identity platform perspective, whether it's around policy related to data encryption, masking, tokenization, tagging, et cetera, so that we can easily discover that data when we need to and be able to define the controls based on the policies.
Now, organizationally, you're a relatively novel service, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Versus
correct.
the broader Rakuten's been around for a long time, and
right.
I remember in the early days of cloud when, like all the financial services companies said, "We'll never go to cloud," and of course they all went to cloud. But and there was a big misconception about security. Well, the cloud's not secure, is what all the on-prem people would say. But the reality is, when you talk to practitioners, they said, "No, the cloud's actually really secure. It's just different than what we have, and we have to get the cloud vendors to certify that they can do security the way we do it." So it's probably not the case for rewards because you're relatively new, but maybe it is, where you have to take a look at what's inside of Snowflake and map it to your security edicts. What did that mapping look like? How much dissonance was there? How did you guys work it out, or did it just come naturally?
No, it's still a work in progress. So data governance is a program that's continuously being built, and as it's being built, we're discovering new tooling, most of which is in Snowflake to be able to identify the discovery aspect of it, the classification, the tagging, the security controls around it. That is just an iterative process that continues to be developed. The real challenge is when that data is replicated outside of Snowflake, and the other replications, the replication data stores don't have the same controls. That's where we need a better understanding of where that data is going and the controls around that from a second and third party perspective, and that's when you were talking about the sort of cloud aspects,
right.
Getting a better understanding of where those cloud services are mapping in terms of compliance to ensure that we're not just securing the source of record being Snowflake and all the tertiary data repositories as well.
But you could do that data sharing inside of Snowflake, could you not? But the issue is the recipient may not have access to Snowflake,
exactly.
So you've got to enable them.
Exactly, and that's really a game changer for us as we're leaning into partnerships to be able to drive additional revenue. Those data shares have been, and the adoption more widely of Snowflake has been a real opportunity for us.
I get it. So this means you can build your marketplace, and Snowflake enables that, so you don't have to do all the technical mumbo jumbo, that heavy lifting. You can just focus on monetization.
Exactly, right.
Got my vote.
Yeah. Good strategy. So there's a growing push to build AI models where the data already lives. I'm curious to hear how you both see that playing out and what you see as the benefits to that approach. You want to start, Brad?
I think the benefits is that if you bring it into a platform like Snowflake, you have your standard governance models in place and your AI is operating out of those. You don't need to create a new set of governance if you pull it out to a third-party tool. So by having those strong controls in place, looking through things like Trust Center to understand we have all of those things in place. The Horizon Catalog, provides you governance from the ingest of data with RBAC, the tagging, masking policies. All of that flows through, so then you can enable the engineers, the data scientists to do what they need to do, but you have that good control boundary around it.
My last question, who's got the advantage, attackers or defenders right now, specifically in the context of AI?
Well, they're not regulated, so they get to do things a lot differently. I would say with AI and threat actors, I wouldn't say there's new novel attacks. They're just better, faster, better social engineering attacks or phishing attacks, quicker time to finding vulnerabilities and exploits. It's really incumbent on security teams to act that much faster. And there's another technology called the human firewall, which we employ, is we still believe there's a lot of value in educating our employees to what to look for, right? They're still pretty good at some things.
I lied, I said this is my last question. Nir Zook, it reminds me of something he said at, I think it was Palo Alto Ignite, I was talking to him in New York. And he said, pre-AI, humans, we could stop with technology 99% of the attacks, and that 1% humans could handle, but now with AI, we're overwhelmed. We can't scale to humans, and so you have to rethink, you have to fight AI with AI. Does that make, basically saying security is a do-over now, within your world, you've got a different, perspective than having to secure everything everywhere. But does that premise, the first part of that premise, make sense to you as CISOs?
Absolutely. I think security today is a data game. You have to have all the data, and you have to quickly be able to look and analyze that data and find those anomalies. We use Snowflake, the platform, to protect our platform, our corporate environment. We use a lot of the AI technologies, machine learning to look for anomalies, look for patterns. we're all in on it and believe that's the way forward.
And you've got the data, not only the data, you got the right data, right?
Right.
Right, and the compute to be able to quant it, right? And that's a real key piece.
So you can move fast, you mean?
Key piece, yep.
Yeah.
All right, well, a fascinating, a little terrifying conversation here. Adam and Brad, thank you both so much for coming on
Thanks,
theCUBE.
Thank you, it was fun.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm Rebecca Knight for Dave Vellante. Stay tuned for more of theCUBE's live coverage from the Snowflake Summit. You're watching theCUBE, the leader in enterprise tech news and analysis.